Good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Hersey. Happy Friday to each of you. And on behalf of FATA, welcome to today's webinar titled From Resistant to Resilient, Strategies for Success. This webinar is being made available through a collaboration between the Florida Department of Children and Families and FATA. Please note that as an attendee, you are in listen-only mode and are only able to view your name. Your webcam and microphone have been disabled. If you have questions, please send them using the chat panel. We will answer questions throughout today's presentation. Our audio is broadcast through the internet to your computer. If you experience poor computer audio at any time during today's presentation, there are a few options to try using the audio connection panel. For computer audio, click the up arrow next to the unmute button, then click Switch Audio Connection. Click Disconnect, click the up arrow and switch audio connection again, then click Call in using computer and follow the instructions. If you continue to experience poor audio through your computer, try using the I will call in option. The access code and event password will be posted in the chat panel momentarily. You must be connected to the audio of this presentation and view it on screen to receive a statement of credit. We are unable to verify attendance if you are not connected to WebEx via your computer or the mobile app. Therefore, phone call only attendees are not eligible for a statement of credit or CEUs. The recording and materials used in today's presentation will be available on the FATA website within 30 business days. To access the recording and PowerPoint, visit www.fata.org, navigate to the Resource Center, and click on Training Library as shown on the screen. FATA produces many webinars and workshops through the support of the Florida Department of Children and Families. To help participants track credits earned through attendance, we host an online community that provides a personalized digital journal where participants can maintain statements of credit for webinars and workshops taken through FATA. A statement of credit and CEUs for up to 2 continuing education credits are available for participating in today's webinar. CEUs are available for persons licensed through the Board of Nursing, the Board of Clinical Social Work, Marriage and Family Therapy, Mental Health Counseling, and for persons credentialed through the Florida Certification Board. Completing the evaluation is necessary to receive CEUs or to access your statement of credit. Please note that the evaluation will close at the end of the day on Wednesday, June 4th, 2025. At the end of today's webinar, you will have 3 opportunities to complete the evaluation: a link posted in the chat, a follow-up email from WebEx, and an automatic web browser pop-up when we end the webinar. To complete the evaluation, you will first need to register or sign into your account. Please ensure your name and email address match the name and email you used when registering for today's webinar. Information you provide FATA as part of registering remains confidential. If you are a licensed healthcare practitioner, be sure to include your Florida license number for reporting to CE Broker when you register with our site for the first time. If you are certified with the Florida Certification Board or licensed outside the state of Florida, you do not need to provide your license or certification number when you register with our site. If you need assistance with account registration, login, or accessing the evaluation, fill out a contact form on our website or email training@floridabha.org before June 4th, 2025. Please note that WebEx monitors the arrival and departure times of attendees and provides a report upon completion of the event. We are not permitted to provide a statement of credit if you do not attend the entire webinar, and we are not permitted to provide partial CEUs. Statements of credit will be posted within 30 business days after the evaluation closes in the professional development section of your FATA account. For licensed practitioners, CEUs will be reported to CE Broker within the same time frame. This presentation is intended solely for educational purposes. The views, opinions, information, and content expressed in the presentation are those of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the state of Florida, the Florida Department of Children and Families, FATA, or the Florida Behavioral Health Association. Attendees should note that sessions are recorded and published in various media. Our presenters today will be Kathleen Roberts and Savannah Prince. Kathleen has more than 15 years of experience in behavioral health at the local, regional, and state levels. She works with community coalitions, providers, and partners to assess substance use trends through data collection and analysis, conduct research, engage partners, build capacity, and conduct community assessments. Mrs. Roberts also serves as a master trainer for Florida with the Substance Abuse Prevention Skills Training Curriculum, supported by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Prior to joining CCA, she worked at the Florida Department of Children and Families, Office of Substance Abuse and Mental Health. She received her Master of Science in Criminology from Florida State University and a Master of Science in Criminal Justice from the University of Central Florida. Savannah is a certified youth, family, and adult peer specialist with a background in both recovery and care-based environments. As a prevention coordinator with Flagler Cares, she supports a 2-county initiative focused on substance use prevention and addressing risk and protective factors. With a degree in sociology from the University of Central Florida, Savannah combines her academic foundation with lived experience to help individuals overcome systemic challenges and promote diversity and recovery. She has held multiple leadership and board roles, contributing to the development and capacity building of her local community. And now I will turn it over to our first presenter, Kathleen. Kathleen, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. And good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. We're very excited about this webinar and the topic that we're going to be discussing. We are going to make this a more interactive opportunity so that you can feel part of the conversation. If it's just us talking to you, it just gets a little bit tiring after a couple hours. So we really want to make sure that we're giving you the opportunity to also share back as we go along with the presentation here today. So my name is Kathleen Roberts. I'm the CEO for Community Coalition Alliance. And I'm here today, thankfully, with Savannah Prince, and she's going to introduce herself and a little bit more about her agency. So let me tell you a little bit about Community Coalition Alliance. We are a coalition of coalitions. Our mission here is to serve as that collective voice of community coalitions as well as our community partners, and working together towards the health and wellness of all Floridians. We work together by bringing everyone and all those various groups with an opportunity to discuss issues, ideas, and opportunities to leverage our efforts and look for ways for us to really be able to address the needs within our community. Part of what we do here is that membership opportunity to bring our various coalitions together, but we also have an opportunity to provide some funding and oversight, a lot of training and technical assistance, and also be able to have a partnership engagement where we continue to find new networks across our states and also across the country to be able to better support our prevention workforce. Together, we're able to do a lot more, and we focus on that data-driven decision-making process to ensure that we're implementing evidence-based strategies and addressing those risk and protective factors that are key to the work that we do. Our membership includes coalitions and community partners across our states, specifically the Northeast region, as well as the Southeast region. We cover over 20 different counties across our state, and we work with rural communities, urban communities, communities throughout the area. What is so nice about this opportunity is that we're able to get various different perspectives, look and hear about the different challenges and barriers that exist within the community, but then also be able to provide opportunities to share success stories and ways to overcome the different challenges. And I'm fortunate that today we have one of our members from Flagler Cares, and I'm going to turn that part over to Savannah to introduce herself and a little bit more about her agency.
Thank you, Kathleen. So I'm Savannah Prince. I'm a prevention coordinator with Flagler Cares and One Voice for Volusia. As Kathleen mentioned, we are part of CCA, and there's so many amazing benefits that we get from CCA, like the technical support and training. So we're very glad to be in partnership with them. And at Flagler Cares, I like to say we do a lot, and we do a lot of different things. Our mission has always been to fill gaps in the community, and we really do that through bold, innovative programming. One example is our HEAL Recovery program, which stands for Hope, empathy, acceptance, and love. We also, under HEAL, host our core program, and that's Coordinated Opioid Recovery. And yes, we love our acronyms here in Florida. Our core program really blends peer support, clinical counseling, case management, and medication-assisted treatment. We know that recovery looks different for everybody, and through this program, we're able to serve people in a variety of different ways. We even work with local community paramedics to offer in-field inductions, which has been great in addressing the accessibility issues we have here in Flagler County. We've also developed our Flagler County Village. It's a collaborative hub where service agencies work under one roof, and we built that on a no wrong door approach, which really helps eliminate those barriers for people seeking help and to those who are providing it. And so, as I mentioned, what do I do and where do I come in? I'm proud to represent our prevention team today, and we approach prevention through the lens of resilience, which we teach to youth, parents, and caregivers, and community stakeholders. We know that resilience isn't just about bouncing back. It's really about building those essential life skills like healthy communication, decision-making, and career navigation to build up those protective factors. Which leads us to one other program I had to highlight, and that's our Girls of Light Summer Experience. Now, bear with me, I know it's another acronym, but Girls of Light stands for Lead, Inspire, Grow, Help, and Thrive. And it's a week-long summer camp for middle school girls that really focuses on those problem-solving skills, career exploration, and substance use prevention. Because resilience is a skill, we know it's up to us as parents, educators, and community members to help build it in our youth. And I'm so excited about the programs we're able to offer. We'll also touch on resilience as we get further along. So I will hand it back to Kathleen so we can start to dive into what we'll be discussing today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Savannah. And as all of you can hear from what Savannah just explained, this is why I'm so excited to have her here with me, because there's so much wealth of information that she brings to the table and the exciting projects that she's working on there with Flagler Cares in both Volusia and Flagler County. So with that, you're going to hear a little bit more as we go through. Today, what we hope to do before we leave here with our time is identify some of those key factors that contribute to resistance and treatments. We also want to enhance the knowledge of evidence-based strategies to overcome resistance. And then we want to analyze the influence of organizational culture on individual outcomes. And lastly, we want to define the critical role of peers in treatment and recovery. We want to move away from that negative connotation of that resistance and really want to move us forward to the idea of resilience. And so that's why we like the title that we put here today, From Resistance to Resilient. We want to focus in on those positives and look for ways that really we can help everyone achieve those positive outcomes. Because with a change of lens and change of perspective, there's a lot of different things that we can do. So I kind of want to set the stage a little bit before we get into our conversation. What we know from the research is that recovery happens. Recovery is possible, and opportunities to make that happen exist through a variety of different ways. And we're going to really hone in on some of those here today. Studies show that individuals that are engaged with peers have fewer emergency department visits. In addition, they also have fewer rehospitalization with the support. We also know that based on the research, we have 22.3 million Americans that are living in recovery. So let's just stop for a second and think about that. 22.3 million Americans. That's a huge number of individuals that have been able to move through their recovery journey and achieve those positive outcomes. And we're going to talk more about why that's possible and how we can really bring in those support systems and how we can start changing the conversation from why are you resistant to let me help you to get through this recovery journey and find those positive outcomes. Our research also shows is that 70% of people who receive treatment report a better quality of life and improved functioning within just 1 year. Just 1 year. That's a lot of individuals right there. The research also shows us that 1 in 10 Americans achieved recovery at some point in their lives. That's a huge amount of our population here. So we see the research, we can know that that recovery is possible. And so knowing that and understanding that and then navigating with how do we achieve that, that's what the conversation is going to be here today. 3 out of 4 people who experience addiction recover. So it's not just one study showing us this. It's not just two. We shared a few of them here, and then within each of those pink highlighted words here, you can get to some of the links where you can get those research articles. So you don't have to take my word for it. Know that the research exists out there and that this recovery, it's not just a conversation we're having, it's a reality for many individuals across our country. And so with that, we're going to go into the next question for you all. What comes to mind when you think of resistance? So I know we can't unmute on here, but please use the chat and type in whether it's a word, a phrase, a brief recap of what does the term resistance mean to you?
Couple people are saying fear, struggle, non-compliance, avoidant, coping, denial, barriers to progress, lacking open-mindedness, denial.
So we see a lot of those different kinds of negative things that come to mind when we think of the word resistance. And I'm actually glad I'm seeing some of these things because we're really going to dive in a little bit deeper into that, into understanding what is resistance, what comes with resistance. We hear a lot from fear, defense mechanism. We hear people that are unwilling to change. We hear some of the ambivalence. I see a lot of fear for change again. So there's a lot of these different things that are coming out. So we're going to dive a little deeper into that and help really understand what resistance is and not what we think it is. So let's go and talk a little bit more about that. And let's give you a definition from what we found in the research. A resistant client is someone who exhibits behaviors that hinder or obstruct the therapeutic process and their own progress towards their goals. Resistance can manifest in various ways. It is often understood as a defense mechanism against the discomfort or anxiety. This discomfort or anxiety may arise from exploring difficult thoughts, feelings, or behaviors. So it's just these things that come up, and there are a number of different reasons for why they're manifesting themselves in the way that you're seeing. There's a number of reasons of experiences, trauma, all of these different things that we're going to go into a little bit more detail here in the next few slides. But it's not what you read here and what I just read to you. You don't hear that it's somebody that doesn't want to move forward. You hear that there are things that are happening that are showing up because they're going through a difficult process. There's discomfort, there's anxiety, and it's happening because it's not easy to move forward. Change isn't easy. For most people, change is very challenging. And that word fear I saw pop up constantly. That is definitely something that is a reality. It's not someone that doesn't want to. It's all of these things that are showing up and coming out because change creates fear because of what they've gone through, what they bring to the table, what they've experienced, and moving through and diving deeper into understanding those feelings, understanding the whys, understanding how they got to where they are. That's not very easy to go through. So resistance you're going to see because the process is not easy. Resistance you're going to see because of what they've experienced and what they've gone through and endured. So we're going to talk more about that. And our hope is from going through this that you'll see things in a different perspective that hopefully will help to work in the work that you do in a way that helps to promote more of that positive outlook, more focus on resilience. So what do we mean by resistance? So resistance is any action or attitude that can block therapy. So it's not someone that doesn't want to, it's just these elements that are showing up. It's those defense pieces that come to mind, that kind of fight or flight. And it comes from a couple of different things. It can be from fear, it can be from the uncertainty, a disruption from the routine, all of these things that come out as a way to help protect. So resistance is that protective piece that we are doing because we're not sure what's going to be ahead. We're not sure if what we're engaging in is going to bring us more issues, more problems, more negative things in our lives. And so we've already gone through life with all of these things that we're struggling with and carrying, and now in front of us could be more of that. So people do become resistant because there could be more of those negative things that they're going to endure or experience. Or even it's just having that conversation about what you've already gone through. It's reliving some of the trauma. It's reliving some of those things that you have been trying to forget or get away. So it is not easy to move forward in this process. And that's why it's so important for us to kind of look through that different lens of not seeing individuals that don't want to change, but more of seeing individuals that are coming to us with a lot of experiences that have created fear, that have created mistrust, that have created these feelings of all of these negative things that are happening to them. And so our role, whether we're in a community setting, whether we're in a clinical setting, is to kind of flip that lens and find ways to help break apart that fear, to help remove the uncertainty, to bring in that hope, to build up resilience. And that's what we're going to be talking about in the next few slides, and how we're going to dive a little bit deeper into understanding the whys. Why is resistance happening? Instead of looking at there's somebody that doesn't want to change, or this person can't, there's nothing we can do to help. There is help. As you saw with those statistics that, we have so many individuals that have achieved recovery. We have so many individuals that have gone through the process. So let's figure out what are those things that we need to put in place to make sure we're moving from resistance to resilience. So let's talk about the types of resistance, because resistance isn't just one thing. It's not just somebody coming in and sitting down with their arms crossed. Okay, that's maybe one example. But there's so many other ways that we think of when we think of resistance, and what that means and what that looks like. So with the first one, we've got passive resistance. So these are individuals that, yes, they come and they're showing up, but that doesn't mean they're really showing up. They may be present, but they're still distant. Then we have active resistance. So active resistance is what you see in some of those kind of frustrating exchanges. There's arguing, they're challenging everything, dismissing suggestions, might even try to prove you wrong. So they're actively engaged in trying to counter whatever's coming. Then we have ambivalence. And that's where we're kind of stuck in that tug of war. Yes, wanting to, but I don't know, but yes, but I don't know, kind of going back and forth with this. It's that internal struggle that they're having, but you're happening to see it there in that exchange. And then we have transference-based resistance. So this happens when individuals project their past experience, becoming more critical of whoever they're talking to, seeing them as unsupportive, seeing them as demanding, trying to ask for things that are too much, and trying to be on that defense. So resistance can come in a variety of different ways. So whether you're seeing the person that's showing up with their arms crossed, whether you're seeing the person that's there fully engaged in a conversation, but the conversation is very much of, no, I disagree, that's not going to be helpful, or then you have the ones that are just, we're going back and forth, and you can see that internal struggle. And then the ones that keep on projecting back. So all those different experiences show different ways that resistance can come up. And sometimes it can be all four. You may experience that depending on where you're starting the conversation. It could be different times that you interact. Maybe it be the first time you see them, they're more of the active resistance. The next time they're just being more passive. And it can go back and forth. So it's up to the individuals that are going to be working with them. It's our responsibility to help move past that fear, to help move to see the hope. That resiliency is there. We have to help to build up what that looks like. We have to help to teach those skills. But then we also have to have that opportunity to have them practice those skills. We're going to talk more about that resiliency as we get through the presentation here today, but kind of keep that in the back of your mind about why this is so important in this conversation.
And I'm just curious, what types of resistance do you feel like you are seeing the most with the people that you serve? Feel free to drop it in the chat.
And we have a good comment here as well that somebody put in. Oh, my chat just jumped. We have someone that said, feeling comfortable with habits, even if the outcomes are not desirable. The discomfort associated with change can create resistance and a feeling of oh, sorry, the chat jumps and that makes it harder to read. The discomfort associated with change can create resistance and a feeling of discomfort in the body. Cognitive, emotive dissonance, change feels uncomfortable, normalize and discuss it.
That's a great point. We have to normalize these feelings. We have to get into a space where we can discuss these things. I'm also seeing a lot of active, some passive. Manipulation. That's a really good point. Manipulation can appear in some of these instances of resistance. Definitely.
Yeah, so we can see by the chat that we're seeing all of these different ways that resistance shows up. And it looks like some of them are seeing how those different things happen once. Sometimes it's passive, sometimes it's active, and it goes around. Excellent.
All
And we
right, thank you.
appreciate everybody chiming in.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about what are some of those signs of resistance. So we kind of went through what we're seeing from resistance. You guys are seeing that with the individuals that you're working with. But what are some other signs that you have some resistance going on? Missing or arriving late to sessions. And it could be that, you have someone that just is not very good with time. But if it's becoming this habit where they're just not showing up, or they're showing up, but they're showing up so much later that you're really cutting into that opportunity for a conversation. I know it's very easy to go, well, it's their responsibility to be here. If they don't want to be here, I can't make them be here. And so we go forward to the next individual that's coming in. And that's not it. It could be something much deeper in there. Minimizing or dismissing the importance of issues. Well, we have to remember the conversations that you're going to be having about why some of these things are happening in their lives, why they're struggling with substance use, why they may be struggling with mental health, is a lot of the things that they're bringing, including trauma. It's got people coming in, they're talking about abuse. They're coming in from explaining generational cycles of this type of experience. And so when they're coming in, it's a lot easier for them to just, oh, it's not a big deal. I've got this under control, because the reality is so much harder to discuss. And going into that can create a lot more of those negative feelings and emotions, and almost like that re-triggering of everything they've already experienced. And now talking about it, they're experiencing it again. So it's a lot easier to just dismiss it or minimize it. Deflecting topics during discussions. So again, we go back to this example of it's so much harder to discuss all of the realities of what they've been through. So when you get to that uncomfortable conversation, our defense is to, oh, let me just change the subject. Oh, those are a nice pair of shoes. Or, oh, hey, what did you do this weekend? Versus wanting to talk about, I'm here today because I've been through this. I'm still struggling with this. There's a lot of issues that I've I'm going through. I have family situation. Those kinds of conversations aren't easy for anybody. And so when you're in that position, that fear, that discomfort, these are what you might be seeing in the resistance. Engaging in passive aggressive behaviors. That is definitely something you will be seeing. And I saw from the chat here, that's something many of you are seeing in the work that you do, whether you're in clinical setting or you're in a community-based organization. Those are definitely some of the things that are happening, and you're seeing that. Exhibiting a lack of engagement or participation. Well, first, we're again, we've mentioned these things about the discomfort. You have to get to the point where it becomes a trust situation that people are willing to share and divulge those very personal experiences and feelings. You don't want to be sharing your most deepest, darkest experiences with someone that you haven't built that trust with. So if you're coming in and the first thing you want to do, so tell me, why are you here? They're not going to want to immediately jump into all of the details that what brought them to this situation. There's a lot of these things that you're going through that you have to first build up that trust, build up a space that is comfortable to have this conversation. You're going to be working on how to make this a place where, while we know it's an uncomfortable conversation, they're feeling a little bit more comfortable in trusting you than person across from them, that it is okay to share this information with you. So we need to change out that lens of seeing all of these things as somebody that doesn't want help, somebody that's not ready to move forward, to understanding we have someone that's coming here with a lot on their plate, a lot of past experience. Now we need to figure out how to build up this trust, this space where they can go through those uncomfortable conversations to move forward to the next place. But we have to stop viewing individuals as somebody that doesn't want to change, somebody that's not ready for change, somebody that is just not part of this process. We have to change that. We have to see individuals that have struggled. And now we have to help them to unwind all of those different struggles to help move to that next phase. So we're going to ask another question here, because I'm really enjoying all of this chat here. Even when we don't ask the question, you guys are chiming in.
I know, and I just wanted to acknowledge that a lot of what you guys are mentioning in the chat, we are going to talk through solutions, how to kind of counteract that resistance a little bit later. So I just want to highlight, we're not ignoring you in the chat there. We're going to come back to it. And I think you guys have touched on a lot of key points. When we're working with individuals who have trauma, who are actively suffering from substance use disorder and mental health challenges, we often expect that they're going to have this toolkit of skills to be able to communicate effectively, to recognize emotion, to be able to regulate their own emotions and behavior. And just from that simple expectation, we might be setting them up for failure. Because I know when I was not in recovery, I didn't have those skills. I'm still working on skills today. So we really have to recognize our own expectations and what we're bringing to the room with the people that we're serving. So I just wanted to touch on that before we move on to this next question.
And so our next question to you is, and some of you have kind of already chimed in on this particular one, but why do you think you encounter resistance in your interactions? And I know we have a wide variety of individuals on here. Some of you are in those clinical settings that are doing therapy with individuals, working on some kind of a substance use treatment. Or some of you are out here in the community setting that are working on recovery support or prevention education. So you're experiences vary here, and that's okay. That's why we also really like this topic, is because it's relevant no matter where you are in that continuum of care. And it's really important that we build up this new way of looking at individuals, whether we're out there educating on some prevention and some of the awareness, whether we're there providing some recovery supports or anything in between.
Mhm. Yeah,
So it
and
looks like,
Kathleen, we have some great feedback here in the chat. Sarah, I'm trying to find your comment again. Sarah mentioned that youth served discussed feeling resistance and not wanting to re-engage in treatment due to frequent turnover of counselors in community agencies. I believe this is a systemic concern. Sarah, that's such a valid point. You know, how can we continue to build trust when there's just this never-ending door of people? You know, I don't want to have to divulge my past trauma and things that are very vulnerable just to have a new person come in and say, hey, let's do this again in a couple weeks, a brand new person. So turnover is definitely hard, especially when we're dealing with youth. You know, they need that stability. They want to have those connections and the same people in their lives. And it's very hard if that's not being able to be delivered.
yeah, that is huge, because that, that part of that buildup of the trust is, if you, every time you go in, you have a different person, like, why am I going to tell you you're just going to leave too? And that in itself could be triggering, because maybe some of the things that they came with is being abandoned, being left, being neglected. And here they are looking for help, and it's happening all over again.
Yeah. I'm also seeing some thoughts around societal and personal shame. Deborah, you're right, that is very powerful. There can be a lot of shame and a lot of stigma when we talk about substance use disorder. And again, we have to be mindful as people who are serving our community and individuals, what we are also bringing to the table with that.
And I see we also have some comments in here about anger, anger and for having to be forced into the treatment. They're there under court order. They're just going to do the bare minimum to get by, because it's taken away their own control, and everything is now being forced on them. So I think that's a very valid point, because that is something that does show up. And again, it could be one of those things that could re-trigger from some of the experiences that they've had in the past. There's some great comments in here. A lot of fear, trying to maintain that semblance of of control. Again, back to that piece, uncertainty. And that goes again with the comment about, the rotating staff person. If you don't know what that next step's going to look like, or who are you going to be trusting, it's going to be very hard to move forward. So making sure that we're intentional with those approaches, and that we're going to talk a little bit about organizational role and how this is so critical. It's not just the individuals that are working there, whether it's therapy, peer support, education. It's a whole organizational approach of where they're taking in that trauma-informed approach with policies, with the way they work with staff, the way that everything follows through from the top down to the bottom, because otherwise it's going to be very challenging in that change process.
Yeah, definitely. And I've seen a few of you mentioned, again, those mandated clients. Nobody wants to be told they have to do something. I think it's human nature to be a little combative, especially when you truly believe you know what's best for yourself. And then when we get people in those environments and we say, okay, now you have to go to treatment. You have to meet with a case manager, a peer, a clinical therapist, and then you also have to have your meetings with Department of Children and Families and their case manager and their team. And you also have to do these 8 other things, right? The resistance, I wouldn't be surprised by, because we are putting such a heavy burden and expectation on people who, again, don't have that skill set to really thrive in that type of environment. So I encourage you to be mindful about the expectations and again, humanize them. What are they going through? What other agencies are involved in their lives? What other commitments do they have? Because that can, again, change your perception. And we're going to talk about the lens of perception now.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that piece in again about this building up the skills, because that is so true. We are assuming that people are going to be showing up with knowing where they're supposed to go, what they're supposed to do, and it can become so overwhelming so quickly. You just think about, like, if we think of regular health and you have to go see your doctor, and then all of a sudden you have to see a specialist, and then you have to see this other specialist, then you have to navigate the system of care of going here and there. After a while, it becomes overwhelming of, where do you even go? Where do you start? How do you take this approach? And so we have to change this lens. We have to change our perception. And that is our role as individuals that are going to be working with people that are trying to move through recovery. We can't just go with this idea that they're coming to our table, they should know better. They should know where they're supposed to go. They should know that they have to meet with all of those required meetings, go to the counseling. If they have children involved, make sure the children are going to their appropriate appointments, that they're doing this, X, Y, Z. And then add on top of that, they also have work and they have to show up for that. And they can't be late and they can't miss. And so it becomes this monumental process that becomes bigger than what they feel that they can get through. So we, as the individuals in their lives, helping to navigate, have to take a step back of going, okay, let's understand, let's talk this through, let's help to figure out, what does that first step look like? Build up that trust, build up that rapport, and be the person that's going to show up for them and not just keep on leaving like maybe other people have in their lives. So it's very important to have that outlook, whether you are talking about some education that you're doing out in the community, or whether we're talking about some clinical services of therapy, or whether we're talking about the peer support out there. We have to all have a shift in lens and understanding why those behaviors are happening. Where is this coming from? And know that people don't have all the skills on day one. We all learn those things, right? We have to learn, just like any other thing in our life. We didn't know how to ride a bike the first day we could walk. We had to learn. We didn't know how to even do things like laundry. You have to learn those things. You don't wake up one day and have all the knowledge that you need to thrive in life. And so when individuals come to you with all of these past experiences, the trauma, generational influences on all these different kinds of negative outcomes, we have to take that step back and say, okay, let's start with where can we go from here? And understanding, how do we move to that next phase, and stop the blame game. The blame game is not helpful to anybody. Seeing them as the culprit of why progress isn't happening isn't going to get us anywhere except for a standstill. So what are the things that are influencing this resistance approach? What are the things that are a part of understanding why they are being passive aggressive, or why they're not showing up to appointments, or why they are countering everything that you're trying to suggest? So many of you have already said this part about fear, that fear of change, because people are feeling that anxiousness about stepping out of their comfort zone. Going to something that you don't know is sometimes so overwhelming. You're willing to keep putting up with the discomfort that you have because at least you know this discomfort. You don't know what's ahead. And so that fear of change can be so overwhelming that it stops that progress. So we have to find a way to build up that rapport, to build up the trust, to kind of get into that change of fear that what's ahead is going to be better. What's ahead is going to help them to reach those positive outcomes. What's ahead is not going to be worse than where they are right now. And it's not going to happen in one conversation, unfortunately. It's one of those things that we're going to have to keep on showing up, having conversations, but not just by showing up with words, but showing up to be there, to show that support, to be able to give the example of these different things. So that fear is huge. Besides fear, we also have that mistrust and the skepticism, especially if we have like what somebody mentioned here about the staff turnover. If every time you go in, there's somebody new you're meeting, somebody else that's giving their 2 cents, and maybe their 2 cents is different from the last 2 cents that you just got. So now you're going, well, now I have a new person. They're saying something different. I guess there's nothing I'm going to be able to do here. And then you go in again, and there's somebody else. So that mistrust is then building up and becoming larger. And so you've got fear going on, you've got mistrust going on. And so those are doubling down as to why resistance is occurring, why they are now maybe not showing up on time anymore, or maybe why when they were first having conversations, they're now just sitting there. Yep, maybe they showed up because they have to, but the conversations are not going. They're not engaged because these little things keep showing up. In addition to that, there's also a lack of understanding. We talk about, the importance of skills. We don't all come over one day and have every skill we need to know. That goes also for knowledge. We don't know all these different things from the start. Individuals that are coming for help may not know a lot of the things that you know because you've been trained in this. You've gone through the education part, you've had the experience, but they're coming to you without a clear understanding of why some of these things are happening. They don't understand maybe the different solutions or suggestions that you might be providing. It may seem to them something that they don't think is going to be helpful at all because they haven't learned that. They haven't been to school, understanding the research, looking at the data. Like, I love data, but I know not everybody's at home looking up the different statistics and understanding what is going on in our community. So we have to understand when they come, they don't have that knowledge or understanding. And part of your role is to share that information of why this is beneficial. How will this help? Not a, listen to me, I'm going to tell you what to do. I don't understand why you're not doing this. You're not succeeding because you didn't follow my suggestions. Well, let's unpack that a little bit more and go into, well, why is this happening? Why am I suggesting taking X, Y, Z steps? Why are we having these conversations? Why is it important that I ask you how you're feeling at different times of the week or of the year so that I can better understand and support you? So we have to break these things down. And
Yeah,
then,
and Kathleen, you bring up such a good point, especially around the knowledge. It's also our job as providers and people serving our community to stay knowledgeable. And Anna, I saw your comment in the chat. Anna says, something I'm always mindful of is the 12-step programs. It's not always helpful for some people. Anna, you hit the nail on the head. Recovery is different for everybody. And that's the beautiful thing about recovery. And it's also our job as providers to do that own research. What other options are there? So when you get somebody who is saying, I went to meetings, it didn't work for me, and maybe you're thinking that's resistance, and they're just trying to find a solution. So that's one example where knowledge, especially extending that, what are recovery options? What does that recovery capital look like? Which we'll dive into a little bit further. It can really make or break your experience.
yeah, that is fantastic. It really, and that's why we always say person-centered, because it's the person that we have to think of, not here's all the different strategies. I'm going to pick one and I'm going to give it to you, and you must do this. Well, it may not be a right fit. I mean, if we think of even with our physical health and medication, there's different medications that work for different people. Ibuprofen for one person may not be what will help somebody else. So we can't just prescribe the same thing for every person because we're all different. What we've experienced is different. What are the things that we know or understand is going to be different, and where we go forward is going to have to look different to reach our success.
Absolutely.
And I really love that we're having such an engaged audience today, Savannah, because they just keep on coming in, and this is fantastic. It means that this is definitely a topic that is of interest to many people, and that they're seeing this out in the field. And so The other influencer for why we're seeing resistance is that perceived lack of control. And that kind of came up in some of those comments, especially when people are being forced to treatment, mandated, court ordered, whatever that looks like. If you're going in and you're being told you have to do these classes over here, you have to do this over there, you have to, that you have to, all of a sudden becomes so overpowering because nobody's asking, what would you like? What's better for you? And you're losing the self, that person-centered approach by constantly saying, do this, do this, do this, without the conversation about what would you like to do? Where can we start? And so you pull all these things together and all of a sudden there's no reason why someone wouldn't be resistant because all of these things are ganging up on them. And then the last thing we kind of want to push out here is that past negative experience. So we've been saying people are showing up with what they've experienced, what they have experienced physically, mentally, emotionally, what the traumas are that they've gone through, what the family life may look like or lack of family look like. What are the things that they're coming to? All of our past experiences will influence us. And so if we're coming here, bringing all of this to the table, we've got this fear of change. We have little understanding about behavioral health or why we're being told to do X, Y, Z. If we're getting solutions without the rationale of why these solutions are being provided, we're going to go into that self-defense mechanism. And that defense mechanism is going to be shutting out what information is coming our way. It's going to be building up the wall so that we are distant. It's going to be all of the reasons that you're seeing out. Many of you have mentioned here about those different types of resistance, the active resistance, the passive ones. There's that kind of helps to understand why is this happening. And so if we can understand from our perspective why this could be happening, now it's time for us to really start going with, well, what are we going to do about it? And where do we go from here? And so the key to that is, one, we got to stop blaming the person. It becomes overwhelming. It becomes a place where I don't know how to move forward when I'm told all of these different things that I need to be doing. I also have work that I have to go to. If they have a family, they have children to care for. If they have a relationship, there's that piece going on. There's a lot of different things, and they're trying to come to the table with that. We'll start with the first one, unrealistic expectations. It may seem like we're providing the best recommendations, and it may definitely be recommendations that are needed. But if we're providing so many of those recommendations where it becomes too much to try to achieve all at once, then you're going to have that resistance happening. You're going to have the shutdown. You're going to have the, no, I can't do this. And they may feel like they can't do it. They may feel it is unrealistic. So it's our job to be able to help unpack that of how do we take the information of these solutions that would be helpful to be things that they can achieve. We got to remember again, and we've mentioned this already, people are coming not necessarily with those skill sets. They're coming not with an understanding. And so to them, they may feel like these are unrealistic. I can't achieve all this. I can't do all these things. And we're going to help move them through that process from the I can't to I'm able to. But we also have to make sure that we're not trying to dump everything all at once. We don't want to set them up for failure. We want to set them up for success. And we want them to be in a space where they're going to be able to thrive. That's going to be so key to this work is setting up little pieces at a time where they can achieve it and then build it up from there. Not give too many different things and then say, okay, achieve all of this, or you're just not going to get success. And then if they start to fail trying to do all of this, it's so much easier to give up than to keep struggling. And I see we've got some more chats. So Savannah, if you see anything that kind of fits to what we're talking about, chime in and let me know.
Yeah, we have a lot of situations, specific examples that have been mentioned. Um, Brian says, I have a current client that agreed to treatment verbally but refused to sign documents due to fear, distrust, anxiety. Nancy mentioned the failure after going through rehab again. Tracy has a participant who is resistant due to leaving her pet behind for treatment. And Tracy, this is one that I saw so often when I worked in residential treatment. And there are programs that will take animals. And again, it's kind of our job as providers to have the knowledge of, okay, if this treatment provider inpatient facility won't take dogs, is there another one that can? Um, because especially with animals, there are support. That lack of trusting, our fur babies to another person can be really difficult on top of all of those other things. So sometimes there are options. Um, and Brian, hopefully you take something away here that can help you work through that client that agreed verbally. And then when it came time to sign the paperwork, was like, okay, wait a minute, maybe this isn't the right step for me. Hopefully you can take away something today that you can bring back to your person.
Yeah, that is great. And again, it's helping them to walk through the process. And it's not just, okay, I need you to do all of these things on the checklist, but it's sitting there with them, go through the checklist together, helping them to avoid this next one that we say about the being overwhelmed, the thought of the being inundated with all of these other additional responsibilities on top of everything else that you have in life, the job, kids, family, all of those other things. Because it's complex and there are a lot of different things they're going to be navigating through, and becoming overwhelmed leads to that whole shutdown. It leads to that, I can't do this. There's too much here. There's only so many hours in a day. I just cannot commit to more. And if they've had, some of people have mentioned here about experiencing failure from a previous attempt, they have that fear that this will happen again. I'm just going to stop now because it's going to be another failure. So, and it's so much easier to just jump on that. So for us in this field, we have to help them navigate past that, to move that some of that overwhelming feeling away, and to build up that encouragement of, you're not going to fail. We can succeed because recovery is possible. And we see 22 million people in our country are in recovery. That's amazing. If that many people can achieve and go through this process, we can help you find that way too. And I love what you said there about giving options for, if they do have, an animal that is part of their support system and they're trying to get into treatment, uh, knowing that that's part of our role too, is understanding the people that we're working with. If we've been having these conversations, you'll know how important that pet is. And it's not just a pet, it's their support system. And so looking for those alternatives to get over those barriers is so really important. Let's see. Oh, that's a great point here. Somebody chimed in about some humane societies and shelters will take pets in a while people are in recovery treatment, so that they can be taken care of. And that's, I didn't know that they would do that. That's fantastic. So for those that have mentioned things like that, that's a great tip. So thank you so much. Um, so in addition to that, what else are we blaming people for? Well, that takes us to also the miscommunication. And miscommunication happens because we have to remember, they're not from this field. They didn't go to school to learn all of this information that we have. They may not understand necessarily some of the information that we're sharing. And so it's not a blame on them. We have to understand they just misunderstood something, or they took something the wrong way, or they just didn't do the things that you wanted them to do in a certain manner. But that isn't the reason to blame, but it's more a reason to understand, well, how do we get to this place? How do we better support? Um, and then we also have different priorities or goals. we're there for our role and our job in the organization we're in, and we have a set task. And I'm going to do my set task working with this individual. That's my goal here. But they're coming and they may have different goals. Their goals there, maybe it's because they've been mandated to go to treatment. And so they're trying to get through whatever those little checklist items are to be able to either maybe have their children back or avoid some kind of sentence for whatever that took place. They may have other things that are a priority, such as making sure they don't lose their job, because they can't. If they do that, then all of a sudden we've got financial issues, and they may be the caregiver for their family. There are different reasons that their priorities don't match our priorities, because we're all people. We all have things going on in our lives. And it doesn't mean that they don't care. It just means that there are other things happening in their life, and we need to understand that as part of what we do when working with individuals.
And
And
Kath,
so, oh, go ahead.
sorry, Catherine brought up a really good point. She said, beware of individuals that have worked in this field. It's easy to be dismissive. Oh, you know what to do. You studied this. And Catherine, that comes back to our own lens, our own perspective. It is so easy for us to make those assumptions. If I'm serving somebody who's a social worker or a therapist, I'd be like, oh, well, you studied coping, you know what that looks like, you're fine. And you're right, it is so easy to dismiss somebody just because we assume that they have the education, that they have the skill set, and that's not necessarily true. And we know that sometimes the best of people still need support. So I really appreciate that thought.
Yeah, that is fantastic. I'm really loving all of this chiming in from everybody participating today. And I think one of the things we want to do too is we keep seeing people putting in some other suggestions. I would love to copy everything that we have here and add it to our resources list, because we have another person here, Brian, that put about a group called Dogs Matter, for people who care for pets while they're in treatment. So that's fantastic. And I hadn't heard of that one before. So thank you so much for everybody chiming in on this. This is fantastic. The last one that we want to kind of bring up here is something that relates back to those emotional barriers. And we talk so much about people are coming to the table with so many things that they've experienced, lived through, felt when they get to you. And so those barriers could be the reasons why we're seeing that resistance. And so we got to stop with you are preventing your recovery, to understanding what's happening, those unexpressed emotions, the fear, the anger, insecurity, that those are the things that are just continuing to eat at the person, that is then fueling why resistance is happening. Recognizing that these are the different things that are happening to individuals, it'll help to guide us to stop blaming the person. We got to move away from blaming to understanding why is this person here? What has this person been through? What are the things that this person is now continually experiencing? And then what are the ways that we can work to build up the trust, to build up that rapport, to build up a place where they will move forward and not be as resistant because of everything they've experienced. So how do we move from here? How do we ease that resistance to encourage that adaptability? How do we move on from those phases of things? Well, the first is establishing the trust. That has come up a lot. Many of you noted that in the chat, is building that rapport and building the trust to foster that connection, to be able to then move forward with identifying what's going to be beneficial for the individual. And again, we're going to be person-centered. What works for one person may not necessarily work for another. So we need to make sure we're taking on that piece. Tailoring those therapeutic methods to align with the client's readiness. That's going to be very important, because if we just dump everything in all at once, we're going to build up that mountain of monumental, overwhelming task lists that they feel like they can't tackle and they can't get through. So we have to help to get to where are they at this moment in time? Where can we go as the next step in this moment in time? And not just unleash that giant list of all these different things you're going to have to tackle. Otherwise, we're going to keep having that resistance happening. And then we're going to have also repairing and strengthening alliance. Repairing. I think that's such a really important term because there's been so much that has happened in their life. There's been so much that they've had to overcome already. And I really like that somebody brought up the point about the staff turnover because that constant change and change and change, you get to a place where it's really hard to build connections. And so if we're finally at a place, somebody's coming to you, you don't know if they've had that revolving door experience. And then everything that they've come to the table with, maybe that revolving door, a home life. So we have a lot of work ahead of repairing some of that connection, of repairing and strengthening that ability to trust, because that's a skill too. We said and mentioned this from the beginning about we don't all come with all the needed skills. So we have to teach some of those and then also give opportunities to try out those skills. Trust is not easy and you're not going to have it on the first day of conversation. It's going to be an ongoing process, and showing up and being able to build that up, that's how we're going to get there. And then we have a lot of evidence-based approaches to how we can work to move from resistance into that role of that place of resilience. Cognitive behavioral strategies is one of them. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that next couple of slides. And then the last one of motivational interviewing. And we're going to talk about a couple of those techniques. There are other webinars that FATA has put on that have touched on cognitive behavioral therapy and motivational interviewing. So if you're really interested in these, I would suggest going to their webinar vault. They have great instructors that have presented on those topics with some really wonderful tips on how to take this in. So with the cognitive behavioral strategies, what we're talking about here is looking at how to change some of the negatives of thoughts in order to be able to change some of the from negative to the positive, which will lead into those positive behaviors. So the idea behind this is that if we start with the thoughts that help influence those emotions, and if we move it from away from the negative to the positive, we will then have the influence on seeing behavior start to shift more on the positive as well. So these are great ways to be able to see how this process flows together. And it's through patterns that affect those emotions that then will lead to those efforts that will affect the behavior. And so there's a lot of great research behind these approaches of how we take and reframe what we are thinking in order to influence how we are reacting. Because if you think about when we talk about the resistance, we're seeing actions happening, right? We're seeing that passive resistance, we're seeing active resistance. That's coming from somewhere. And we've talked about those feelings and emotions, the fear. We talked about, the anger, all the distrust, those negative things are driving those behaviors, which is that resistance. So if we start to shift and move away from those negative thoughts and those negative emotions to replace it with more of those positives, the trust, the discussion around the positive ideas instead of just constant negative, then eventually we start to see that replacement of that resistance to being somebody ready to listen. So we're reframing those approaches. And if we reframe thoughts more into the positive, then we're going to see that leading to more positive feelings, which then will lead to those more helpful behaviors. And you're going to go from the folded arms, leaning back, to someone having an engaged conversation and then helping them to move to that next phase. So if we can see how the negative leads to these negative behaviors that are showing up when you're talking about resistant clients, then if we flip the script to say, okay, well, let's start moving into the positive to change those thoughts that then change their feelings to now we're going to see some of those changes in the behavior that they're exhibiting, which will mean listening to the suggestions and recommendations, engaging in the strategies that we provide and moving through there. So while it seems so simple, like make it positive, they act positive. It seems simple, but it's not. There's a lot of work that has to go into it, and it takes a lot of effort to move away from the fear, the negative, the those ideas of why they're not wanting to engage. So there are a few key techniques that kind of go along with this, and that's that cognitive restructuring. So it's reframing that thought, reframing the way that they're thinking about what's happening. It's reframing some of the things that go from negative to then replacing it with something more balanced, more constructive, more positive. The guided discovery. So this is challenging assumptions by exploring alternative perspectives. How do we kind of shift that approach to then move into a different way of thinking through things? Behavioral activation. So you're encouraging those positive activities that help to improve mood, motivation. And that's why a lot of times in some of the therapy sessions, you see recommendations for engaging in things like yoga, mindfulness, de-stressors, meditation. It changes the mindset. If our mindsets can change when we're having all of these things happen, then it helps us to change the emotions that we're feeling, which then will in turn help to change how we're responding to things. So back to that behavior. So if we're able to do that, then we're able to help those individuals move into the next phase of those suggestions and recommendations of what they could be doing. It isn't easy. You can't just go in one day and say, okay, change it to positive and everything will flow just fine. It's that skill. Again, we go back to the skill piece, to making sure that we're helping them to learn what these skills are and then giving them opportunities to practice that. Exposure therapy, that's gradually facing some of the fears that have been the controllers for the individual. It's been some of the reasoning for why you're seeing that resistance, and then slowly moving it away to reduce some of that anxiety, moving away from the controller being fear to the controller being the person moving forward and having that trust that what's ahead and that change is going to be more positive than where they currently are. Also, what is in here is the journaling and thought records. Journaling has been something that we've seen a lot in the research and has had such a beneficial impact on individuals. Being able to write down your thoughts, write down the emotions, to be able to even find like patterns for, well, why are these emotions showing up? Why are these feelings showing up? Maybe it's showing up at certain times. And so if we can start to figure out what that is, we start to identify what are those triggers. We start to see the things that kind of escalate some of those negative thoughts and feelings, which then again go into those negative behaviors that you will see come out. And then the mindfulness and relaxation techniques, those are definitely other recommendations of helping to set that mindset in a more positive light, helping to move past those negative thoughts, the anger, the fear, all of the things that have been mentioned here for why we're seeing resistance happening. And so if you are very interested in the cognitive behavioral therapy, there's so much information out there. It is definitely one of the recommended approaches because it helps us to move out of all of those different things that we mentioned here at the beginning of why we're seeing resistance. It's that mindset change. And if we can change and shift from the negative to a more positive, and providing the skills on how to reach that and how to continue to achieve that is going to be beneficial. And so then we have motivational interviewing, another evidence-based approach to understand, to working with individuals and being able to provide that support. And before we get too far into this, we do have a question for you. Again, we really like the engagement part. So we want to kind of talk about, have you ever been frustrated when trying to help someone? And for some of you that maybe aren't working with individuals on that level, think about in your personal life. Have you ever had someone that you were trying to help, a family member, a friend, and just got frustrated when you're just trying to help? So it looks like this is something we can all relate to. And we're getting yeses across the board. So
Got some
I
with
guess,
exclamation points, some all caps.
yeah. And I see someone, yes, my sister, children. And you know what? I can relate. I've got brothers and children. And yes, frustration, that is definitely something we can all relate to. So this is a normal thing. Being frustrated is not a negative. It's our response to frustration. That's what we need to focus in on, because frustration, it's an emotion that happens to us. And one of the things that's so important for our field and our discussions is that emotions in themselves are not bad. Emotions are things that we have building up inside of us. It's the, what do we do with our emotions? How do we regulate that emotion? That's the focus of where we want to be. It looks like, okay, we'll get some more examples here. So we have someone that said, yep, this happened just the other day, working with someone with 3 different versions of that about their relapse. Someone that's mentioned here, myself, that I'm not able to make them do something and I can't work harder than they want to. So there's a lot of these things that people can relate to in personal life, in professional life. So now, how do we move past that frustration? So that's where we need to find that balance, find the recommendations. And what we really like about the motivational interviewing approach is that this helps us to move from having the frustration to finding ways to deal with the frustration and move forward. What the research shows is that by applying motivational interviewing and building that as a part of the work that you do, and again, this is not just for those that are working in a clinical setting. Motivational interviewing and these approaches work, whether you're in a community-based organization out doing education and awareness, whether you're in a clinical setting, and then or whether you're in a community based with peer support and working through that. This approach helps to reduce the burnout, because frustration after a while that can build up, right? If we are constantly getting to that point of we can't get anywhere, we're feeling that frustration, then it's like, why do I keep doing this? I'm not getting anywhere, and burnout happens. It also helps to help build up those healthy boundaries. And then most importantly, it helps to avoid some of that compassion fatigue. It is something that I know many of us in the field have heard about, have maybe struggled with. And so if we build in some of these techniques into the work that we do, it helps to reduce some of those things. So, well, I'll tell you a little bit about motivational interviewing. Like I mentioned, there have been previous webinars that have been done on this that have go into a lot more detail about what motivational interviewing is, what those processes are. But I wanted to share a couple of elements of it to just give you kind of that foundation. So motivational interviewing is that a collaborative, goal-oriented style of communication designed to enhance a person's own desire to change their behavior. The word interviewing is used to describe the conversation technique because it is question-based. And that's really the key of all this. It's that conversation to get a little bit deeper, to try to find out what's going on underneath. And if we keep saying the reasons that we see some of this resistance happening is from things that are happening deep within, the fear, the distrust, we're going to be able to get to that, unpack that by having conversations where questions are being asked to get to the understanding. And it may be what you will find is that the individual you're working with they may not necessarily know why they are being resistant. And these kinds of conversations help them to also get to the bottom of, well, why am I resistant? Why am I not able to work through this process? Or why am I not able to work with this person? Or why am I not able to take this approach? As we dig deeper into this, it helps us to unpack the whys. The whys are so really important. And so what is the underlying theory behind motivational interviewing is that people are ambivalent about making changes. We talked about that. The change comes fear of the unknown. What's ahead? What if I keep doing this, then what's ahead could be worse than where I am. So then we have to have this talk about change to move them past this and be able to see that possibility of the positives ahead, that change is going to be accomplished. And it's more of moving past that resistance that is what predicts that lack of change, to getting the person to start talking more about making those changes, where it becomes, again, person-centered, where they're wanting to go, and helping to direct where they will be moving forward. There are 4 elements that go as a part of the motivational interviewing, which is engaging, focus, plan, and evoke. So engage, that's the process by establishing the trust, right? We've talked about trust and how important it is. Establishing respect, building up that healthy relationship to be able to have the trust and faith that what is ahead is going to be better than where they are right now. The focus is that ongoing process of helping to seek where we're going and help to keep the direction of where they want to move into. Evoke is the process intended to help resolve some of that ambivalence and help to move to change. And then the plan process is what you are doing with the individual while you're going through this change plan. And again, it's not us telling them, it's we're working together, letting the individual be the driver of their future and their outcome and how to move forward with it. And when we talk about the change talk, it's more moving to that desire to change. I wish I could be a better mom to my kid. I don't want to relapse. I'm looking forward to a life of recovery. So it's the I, and that's what's happening. The change talk with the ability to change. I made all of my appointments. I made all of my appointments before now. That sounds like something I can do. I stayed sober on my own. It's again the I, the person centered, and the reasons for the change when we're getting to understanding why this is happening and helping them move through this process. And I guess I'm not going to go into too much of this because that's a whole other webinar, but there is so much more to this motivational interviewing and approach. And I highly recommend for those that are working with individuals and helping them to move through that change process to really look into this approach. So with this, now it comes to the conversation about our approach. And so what that's going to look like in those next steps. And so we have to move again and changing our lens of we're not here to lecture. We're here to listen. We're here to try to better understand why people are at our table. What did they come with? What did they experience? What did they go through? What do they feel inside? We have to move to be more empathetic with the individuals we're working with versus being accusatory. It is very hard. It's very easy to just go back to that blame game, but we have to really be intentional in stopping that approach into understanding why did they not show up? Why did they argue during our session? Why did this happen? And to dig in deeper to understand so then we can do a better job in helping them to move into that next phase. And being sure to focus in on where we're moving into and being able to do more of what's beneficial for this change process versus the consequence. So we're going to be learning to roll with the resistance, because as the title is for our webinar today, from resistant to resilient, we need to move them from this phase into something that's going to then be able to help us to reach that change level. So, with rolling with resistance, the simple reflection, acknowledge that individual's viewpoint, being able to have them be heard and letting them know that they're being heard. Amplified reflection, to be able to reflect back to what individual has said, kind of to bring it out, and say it maybe in a way that we are not bringing in any sarcasm, or not having those kinds of pieces that are going to dampen what conversation is happening. The double-sided reflection, acknowledging both sides of the individual's ambivalence, trying to pull in information that the individual has offered throughout the visit into the conversation. Then shifting that focus. So now we're going to be moving into the individual's attention away from the issue that they were kind of stuck on, to move into something else and something different. And then into reframing, going to acknowledge the validity of the individual's perspective, their observations, but then also offer maybe new interpretations of what you're seeing here. And then lastly, being able to emphasize that personal control, to communicate to the individual that their decision, whether or not to make that change, and what that's going to look like, and how we're going to move through that process. What is really important is that behavior is communication. So when we're seeing that behavior of resistance, they're communicating something back, which can mean all of these things that we discussed here. So that responsibility to try to understand what is being communicated comes with us. Why? Because we went through this training. We went through the skill building phase of understanding what is happening. And we've talked about this already. They're coming to the table. They don't know this. They weren't trained in this. Maybe sometimes we do have individuals from our field that are needing treatment as well. But like Savannah mentioned, just because they're in the field doesn't mean they also have the skill set or know exactly. So that lies on us, on helping them to understand what's happening here. And it's really important that we realize, again, how impactful trauma is and how that can continue to show up, whether we're seeing it when people are angry, whether people are being silent and not engaging, or being reluctant to say things, being selective maybe even with memory, intentional forgetfulness, frustration. There's different ways that trauma can be showing up. If that's something that you haven't done a lot of webinars on, there's several webinars that have been done on like the adverse childhood experience, the trauma-informed care approaches. There's so much deeper to go into for that piece. We really highly recommend looking at that. But understanding that behavior is communicating something to you, instead of going back to the blame game. They just don't want to change, to understanding why are they not showing up? Why are they not engaged? Why are they constantly going against everything that I'm trying to say here? I'm just trying to help. Why do they not follow my directions? Let's go a little deeper into understanding what are they bringing to the table that we need to unpack and go to understand more. And I think Savannah can go into a little bit more of an explanation of how do we move through that, and how do we go with my favorite saying of nothing about us without us. So Savannah, I'm going to let you have the floor for these conversation pieces.
Thank you. It's just been a wealth of knowledge. It's even, it makes me think as we move through this of things that I could do better or be more mindful of in my own practices. And so nothing about us without us. It really is one of my motivators for why I do what I do and why I'm open about my lived experience. So with peers, especially peer support specialists, we will talk more about the value of peer support. But right now, when we work with clients and we set treatment goals and plans, we really need to make sure it aligns with their values as well. We need to understand and be culturally competent, we might be giving them recommendations, but it's not going to be something that they'll actually implement. We've mentioned this a lot. Some people just have the belief that they will fail, that they are a failure, they can't get to recovery, they can't reach sustainable recovery. And sometimes our foundation is just building back the confidence, helping them understand that they do have the ability to change. And what I love about therapy and about peer support is most of us have heard the saying, are you a cup half full? Are you a cup half empty type of person? And I don't think that's the point. The point about the cup is that it's refillable. And it's our job as providers to help whoever we're serving understand that they have the skills and ability to refill their own cup. You're not going to get the change that you want, that you hope to see when they have that core belief that they are just going to fail. And you're not going to get systemic change if they don't recognize their own personal responsibility and see that they can refill their own cup. So that's just a little bit more about that. And I really want to take time to dive into peer support. So SAMHSA has done a lot of research around peer support workers, and we know that they are essential in recovery-oriented systems of care. Peers bring empowerment, respect, and that lived experience, which allows them to connect to people that can be challenging. When we got into this conversation about challenging or resistant clients or persons, you probably all pictured one person, the one person on your caseload right now that you just want to rip your hair out, right? And it is frustrating. And so we know that by bringing in peers on your team, they can really help guide those conversations. They can connect with people in a way that is hard sometimes. And I want you guys to think about, do you have peers on your team? And if so, how are they being utilized? Just think about it. Because what we often see, especially in clinical organizations, is that peers might be more of, they're assigned to run errands. They're assigned to take clients to appointments. They're possibly picking up medication. And if those are the roles that peer support has on your team, I really encourage you to think innovatively about how you're using your peer specialists. One of my favorite sayings is that peers are the bridge between hope and healing. And if we really have them in supportive roles, we're supporting them in their training and how they serve their people, then we are going to see the difference in healing. So I get asked a lot, what's the difference between peer support and clinical support? So peer support is meant to draw off that lived experience, right? We are allowed to appropriately self-disclose. We've had training, extensive training on how not to re-traumatize somebody, right? And I want to make that clear. We're not going into sessions telling them every little thing about us. We are just appropriately using our lived experience to guide the conversation. We're able to provide emotional and practical support, and that really comes from the established mutual respect. We try to bridge the them versus us divide. How many people have you served where they say, you don't understand, you can't understand, you don't know what I've been through? And so having somebody on your team that's able to come in and say, well, wait, I have been there. We have, here's what worked for me. And sorry, I'm keeping an eye on the chat, but I'm not a great multitasker. So I'm gonna focus over here.
I can see a couple of things of the chat. So, because you did get a couple people that said about how peers are being used. And I really like a couple what some are saying about how they're using them for support to build trust and relatability. Some are also saying they're putting them in opportunities for leadership roles, peer coaching, hosting recovery support groups. Somebody did mention the need for having strong boundaries, and that's been a big issue for the work that's happening in some places. They align so well and so closely that boundaries can be very blurry at times.
Yeah, and that's a great topic to discuss. It's why peers, especially certified peers, have to go through, I'll get you exact numbers in just a minute, but we have to go through extensive training for that very reason. We are supposed to have strong boundaries. This is not a friendship. This is not me being a sponsor. And that's another clear boundary that peers need to have. And so how do you have that conversation? Well, you need to have somebody on your team that knows how to supervise peers and knows how to train them appropriately. And that's easier said than done. But when you have somebody that can effectively supervise peers, it they're providing that level of support. They're providing training on boundaries and ethics. They are really seeing the peer and also checking in with them to make sure they're okay. When you have a supervisor that's able to do that, you should see some healthy boundaries. You should see people who understand the line, because being a certified peer is a profession, and I think so often we get away from that and we just see it as like we're getting a sticker for our lived experience. I mean, I see so much stigma around it, and I hate to put it like that, but that's really been my experience. Is I've worked in clinical specialized teams. I've been on family intensive teams. I've been part of clinical worlds, and sometimes the value of lived experience is often misunderstood. And so that also comes on the other side. There's clinical staff can do things that we as peer supports should not do. And as a peer support specialist, I shouldn't be doing clinical assessments. I'd like to make some advocacy comments later about the GIPRAs, as Kathleen well knows. But we really shouldn't be doing anything around their trauma. We shouldn't be doing clinical interventions. We are definitely not medical doctors. We should not be recommending any sort of medication or treatment diagnoses. We are really there to help somebody fill their cup and learn that they can refill it themselves. What is going to work for them? Recovery, again, we've talked about it already. There are so many different pathways. Of course, you have traditional 12-step programs, but when I say that, the two that probably come to mind are AA or NA. But there's also hundreds of other 12-step programs outside of that. There's Recovery Dharma. You just have so many options, and that's where the value of peer support comes in too, is really being able to focus on the motivational interviewing, helping somebody see that they can change, they can have a better life, and hopefully being that person to say, okay, well, this isn't working for you. Let's figure out what will. And so those are some of the differences there. Kathleen, am I missing anything in the chat?
Well, you had someone that said that they were talking about their specific supervisor, that they saw the importance of this and the supervisor made the effort to become trained and learn how to develop the peer professionally, establish those boundaries, and she feels that she's being treated with equal value among the team, and that's empowered to build her skill and teach her how to be in that non-clinical lane. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's amazing. And peers should be valued team members. We have to stop seeing them as just support staff. Their lived experience really makes them powerful, and how we treat them, we train them, and how we trust them really affects the outcomes for people we serve. it goes so much deeper than somebody who's just able to take them to appointments. If a peer is going to a doctor's appointment, for example, with the person that they're serving, and they're just staying in the car, that is such a disservice to the professional that you have on your team with lived experience. Now, if we shift that and we say, okay, Johnny is asking his peer support specialist to come to the doctor with him because he is really struggling with self-advocating. He's been on this medication for a year and he hates the way he's feeling and he wants our support in that moment. That's appropriate. We are helping our person that we're serving build on those skills so that they can advocate for themselves, so they can make changes in their lives that are going to be healthy. So again, think about how you're utilizing peers. When can you bring people with lived experience to the table, being in leadership roles, advocacy boards, all of the things is super important. And so a little bit more background just on the training that we go through for peers. For Florida specifically, we have to have 40 hours of training. A lot of that is motivational interviewing. It's centered around ethics. It's whole health. And then we have to have 500 hours of supervised experience. So again, it goes back to the supervisor. If you have a strong supervisor on your team, then you're setting up your peer support specialist for success. And I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah, and I love how in the chat there people are mentioning just how valuable peers are. And someone put here, books do not teach like living something. I think that's fantastic. And many have mentioned about how they're happy to have the peers on their team and how that's so supportive for the work that they do.
Yeah, it is definitely important. And when we understand peer support, right, it goes back to the knowledge that we talked about earlier. When we understand how we can really utilize peers, it's kind of like a light bulb moment. When you're carrying this frustration because the person you're serving, you feel like you're just meeting that resistance, right? Sometimes it just takes one conversation with a peer for them to be like, oh, okay, maybe I do want that. Maybe I do want recovery and maybe I can get there. And it really changes what our clinical treatment team members are going to see too. You're going to see those improvements. You're going to see maybe a little bit more willingness. Maybe they're learning to communicate a little bit better. Maybe you see that they're starting to be involved in church or other community events. They're building up those protective factors. And that's because for peers, we look at that recovery capital scale. We're really looking at their personal, family, community, and cultural competence and capital and saying, where do you need help? And what does that look like for you? If we do an assessment and we see that somebody is really lacking community recovery capital, it's our job as peers to be like, okay, well, what do you like to do? How can we get you involved in certain things so we can build your community? And that's really the difference, right? Clinical, you guys are working through the trauma. You're working through what they've been through in their lives. You're giving them some really good strategies and advice. And then peer support's rallying behind you going, okay, let's find ways to implement this so we start seeing results.
And Savannah, somebody put into the chat here that peers have a unique ability to develop rapport and trust. And those are the key things that we talked about throughout this webinar of, well, one of their ways to move past that resistance is building that trust so that they can move forward. And you bring up such a valuable point about how with peers, they help build up the trust that allows then the approaches and therapies and whatever is going to happen in the clinical setting to be able to move forward. And again, moving from that resistance to resilience.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that peers can play roles in a variety of systems of care. So, even if you're a community-based organization, I think I saw somebody from the Department of Juvenile Justice, whether you're in law enforcement, whether you're in a hospital setting, you know, we have seen the peer movement really take off and transcend systems. I'm hoping that we continue to bring recovery doulas here to Florida. It's a relatively new movement that's taken off in Colorado, where moms who are currently pregnant and postpartum can get additional recovery support, again, from somebody who has lived experience. And so those are some of the ways that peers are also seen across the systems is, again, think innovatively, you know, whether it's a leadership role, a community-based role, whether it's a law enforcement role, how can that lived experience really contribute to the conversation and affect the outcomes? You know, at the end of the day, the work we do, it's not just about the program, it's about the people. And peers are people who have walked the path and now they're guiding others with that mutual respect, the compassion, the empathy. And if you're not leveraging peers on your team, I really hope and encourage you to see them as powerful connections and leaders, because you know, some people in recovery are the smartest people I've ever met. They are compassionate. They will lead change. You know, recovery, the definition of recovery is that metamorphosis and that direction to live a self-fulfilled life. And when you have that on your team, you're going to see it. Those people are going to be, let's try something, let's do this, you know, let's advocate, let's step up to the plate and fill the gaps that we need to help our people. So I appreciate all the comments. I love that, you know, you guys have had supervisors that have gone back and say, well, let me learn this a little bit more so I can be better. You know, what a great person to have on your team. And that brings us to professional development. So Kathleen, I'm going to hand it back to you. But again, I just appreciate our participants today. What a great conversation that we've been able to have.
And I so much appreciate you, Savannah, for your willingness to be here and share that perspective. And I think everything that you've shared is just amazing. And for me, having peers around and being able to be a part of this, it's like having superheroes joining your team. They bring so much to the table that help individuals that, you know, are struggling to know that there is hope. And hope exists. I mean, we've already said 22 million individuals across our country are living in recovery and going through that journey. But each one is, you know, person-centered. Their own recovery is going to be very different. So thank you for all of your input and insight and for all the work you do. It's impressive.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So let's talk a little bit about that professional development piece. And one of the things that we really want to stress here is that ongoing professional development is really critical. Research is constantly finding and discovering new things, approaches, lessons learned. We know more today than we did, you know, even just 5 years ago. So making sure that we're having that opportunity to engage your whole staff and what's new and up and coming, and how do we, you know, shift the lens like we've talked about here today to be able to use that in a whole organizational wide approach. Because these tips and these recommendations that we are sharing here, yes, that's great for all, you know, what we're doing with working with individuals, but it also could be great with the rapport that you have within your staff. If your team is able to communicate better and understand where everybody's coming from, you're able to work together better. You're able to do a lot more and reach more individuals in that collaborative approach. Being able to also assist and provide that understanding about trauma is really important. I think somebody mentioned here trauma-informed care. We've had a previous webinar where we talked about trauma-informed care in like early education settings, but this is something that should be in every organization. If organizations would take on that approach of being trauma-informed, from policy to practice, we're able to really see a lot of shift and change. The lens change that we talked about here would be something you would be seeing across your whole agency. And understanding that impact of what trauma can look like and how it manifests is really important, because that takes away from that blame game of they just don't want to. There's no hope for change here. This is what they're doing wrong. And make it more about understanding, well, why is this happening? Why are they resistant? Why are they not showing up? And if we start to make those changes in how we view things and shift the practice to avoid also re-traumatizing and triggering, looking at understanding what is going to be something to help the process, we're going to be able to do a lot more with that. And as we think through this, we talked a lot about the importance of resilience, right? Resilience is something that we all need, and it's about that bouncing back, but it's more than just that. It's also something that we don't wake up one day and have all the resiliency we need in the world, right? We have to learn how to be resilient, and we're constantly having to be encouraged on how to practice those skill sets to be resilient. It's that bubble wrap that we want to put. That's why we get the little bubble wrap image. We want to bubble wrap all of our people, our team members, individuals we're trying to work with, because through that, we'll be able to then nurture these positive relationships, encourage problem solving, promote that growth mindset, teach that emotional regulation, and celebrate effort and progress. Resilience is something that is our protector against all the things that are thrown at us, right? Those risk factors that show up. They are the things that come into play when we are trying to move past things, so that if something comes our way, we can still move past it. But we have to make it an intentional approach that we're teaching people how to do that. And it doesn't happen overnight. And it's going to be a lot of opportunities for us to continue to look at this and then also model it. If we as different organizations model what resiliency can look like, it helps to share that across our team. And then all of a sudden that becomes the practice that your organization is known for doing and moving forward. It's how we're able to then take individuals and help them to become more resilient. And as we look at that, it helps also to foster that independence. And we want the control to be for the person, right? Having them being able to guide the direction for recovery, helping them to make their choices where they have control, and it's not always being told to them what they will be doing next and how they will be doing it. But if you start to believe that this is the way you want to move forward, you're going to find that success. Being able to establish those routines and being able to encourage self-care. We talked a lot as some of the evidence-based approaches with like cognitive behavioral therapy of shifting the mindset, right? Shifting to the positive over the negative influences those emotions that then influence our behaviors. So if we can do those self-care components where we start to have that mindfulness, meditation, taking care of where we can deal with the emotions that we have. Because again, emotions are not bad. It's our reactions to them. That's what we have to work on, and how to move past the anger and frustration to things that can help us to be more positive and do things that can help us move forward. Facilitating social connections. Not everybody comes to your table when they're looking for help with knowing how to have social connections. It's something that also has to be trained, built in, and taught, because some of that comes with the trust, right? And we've talked about resistance sometimes happens because there isn't a trust. And that trust isn't just necessarily to you, the person trying to help them. That mistrust could be to anybody else around them. And that could be from the experiences that they have gone through. Being able to also move through and be intentional, be mindful of your language. Savannah and I have talked about this before about the language. We've been in conferences and we're hearing presentations, and language matters. You could be talking about something really powerful and important, and it can take away from your message when you're using language that can be stigmatizing, that can be demeaning, that can be triggering. So it's really important as we think about organizational structures and approaches that your organization is also working towards ensuring that the language being used is appropriate, isn't going to be something that's going to be off-putting, triggering, harmful to those that you are trying to work with. And it's not easy. Changing your language isn't easy, of course. I mean, we think about, I just think back when I was a kid, some of the expressions that we had. And I think today going, why in the world were we allowed to say those things? That's horrible. But you know, you learn over time, and it does take that effort. And so if organizations can start to do this as a whole, we will see this rolling out really well, which is great. And I hope that the information that we've shared here today, like I really love all the engagement, this has been fantastic, has been helpful to understanding why changing our lens is really important, and how making sure that we are working with those in our field, working with peers, that nothing about us is so really important and valuable. And so we want to make sure that those are the takeaways that you have. But we do have a couple of minutes, and we had a couple of questions that we just wanted to throw out there is, what are some of your takeaways, whether you're in a clinical setting or community setting? What are some of the takeaways that you have from the discussion here today? Or what is something that you may want to try to do differently because of some of the things that we've talked about here today? Well, we're getting a lot of kudos, so that's exciting.
I know, I see that. It was earlier in the chat, but I did see somebody question kind of their internal thoughts, especially around language and that resistance, and saying, maybe I need to take a step back. Linda says, not doing therapy today, research now. Absolutely, research is great. We encourage you to stay knowledgeable. Claudia, yes, the slides will be shared, and then the recorded presentation can also be found in FATA's vault, as Kathleen called it.
And we have included some additional resources here in the slides. So when you get the PowerPoint slides, you'll be able to look at that. These are some of the resources that we thought would be beneficial to those interested in this topic. That includes the Certified Recovery Peer Specialist. You can look on that information. We have a service locator, so you can know about different providers in your area. I do want to highlight Credible Mind. Credible Mind is a behavioral health platform that we were able to bring in back in August, thanks to some of the funding from the settlement dollars. And what it does is it allows individuals that are looking for resources to find credible and vetted information regarding whatever interest they have related to behavioral health, whether it is self-care related, whether you're just struggling with things, because one of the dangers of the internet is that you can search and get anything. And that doesn't mean it's going to be helpful. And sometimes it can even be harmful. And so Credible Minds is something that we've been able to invest in and bring in to ensure that people looking for help are able to find things that are going to be research supported, evidence-based. And it also includes a variety of different assessments, all for free. So check it out if you are interested. And we've got our Flagler Cares resources on here as well. So a lot of information to look up if you're interested. And here's our contact. If you have any questions or you want to chat a little bit more or you need some resources, we're available. Just reach out and we'll do whatever we can to help. And a big thank you to the Department of Children and Families and the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association for the opportunity to be here today with all of you and to talk about this really important topic. So Robert, we are just on time here, turning it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, and thank you, Savannah, both of you for such a great presentation. I have been watching the chat and just really also appreciating the engagement, and I know this will be able to help all the attendees learn to offer better services to some of the clients that can present more challenging situations. So thank you both again for your time and for the presentation. Everyone, please note a couple of business items before we conclude the webinar. First, I am putting the links to both the slides and the evaluation in the chat. Additionally, when I end today's webinar, your web browser will populate a message that looks like this. It says the host or presenter would like WebEx meetings to open a website on your computer. If you click continue, you will be automatically redirected to the evaluation. You must sign into your FATA account to complete the evaluation. If you do not have an account, you can register for one at no cost. You can do so by clicking haven't registered yet underneath the sign in menu. You must use the same email address you used when you registered for today's webinar when you set up your profile in our system. This is the only way for us to connect your attendance during today's webinar to your FATA profile and evaluation completion. For CEUs to be reported to CE Broker for Florida licensed healthcare practitioners, you must provide an accurate Florida Department of Health license prefix and number the first time you register. If you need to add or update your license number, you may do so by logging in and clicking edit on the professional information section of your profile. You will get a third opportunity to complete the evaluation later today. The evaluation will close at the end of the day on Wednesday, June 4th. If you need help with logging in, registering for an account, or completing the evaluation, you can fill out a contact us form on our website or email us at training@floridabha.org. We do not email statements of credit. Instead, once we have verified your attendance and your evaluation completion, a statement of credit will be posted to the professional development section of your profile in your FATA account within 30 business days. You must have attended the entire webinar and completed the evaluation for a statement of credit. We are not permitted to provide partial credit. As a reminder, the recording and materials used in today's presentation will be available on our website within 30 business days. To access the recording in PowerPoint, visit www.fata.org, navigate to the Resource Center, and click on Training Library as shown on screen. Thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar. Thank you again, Savannah and Kathleen, for your time and information. We'd also like to recognize and thank the Florida Department of Children and Families for funding today's education. Have a great day, everyone, and please hold for the evaluation.